we're wired for survival, which causes 75% of our thoughts to be fear-based. The other problem is that we're fundamentally geared to the recent past, and we're oriented to the recent past. And so the effect of it is that when you wake up each morning and your eyes open, you think about your problems, and that generates some negative feelings. And those negative feelings generate more negative thoughts, and you get in this continual negative loop with nothing pulling you forward to your desired life. And as I'll explain a little more deeply in a minute, the solution is you create immense clarity about your life. And you feed the succinct articulation of your life to yourself each day. Exactly the person you want to be, exactly what you want to accomplish, and precisely how you're going to achieve your clearly defined goals.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
We don't have repeat guests very often, and we got one of the best on now. From episode 145 previously is John Mitchell. Welcome back, John.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. I really am.
Yeah, we loved the first conversation we had back in that episode 145. We loved the Entrepreneurs United empowerment experience that you were part of, and you talked to our group and helped us arrange the event down in Austin in 2023, and just can't wait to dig in. You've got this new book. Why'd you write a book?
I've got to defer to John. He inspired me when you guys came to Austin. And of course, his book is amazing. And it inspired me to write my book. And I saw that this methodology I created, I didn't have an easy way for people to apply it. Creating a book suddenly made it easy for everybody to apply it. And there's some brand new things that are incorporated now, that now was the time to write the book. You know, with the universe aligned, and now is the right time.
You know, John, it's fun to recall the first time we met. And Rich referenced it earlier. It was episode 145. And if you're listening to this, wait till the end of this conversation. You're going to want to go back and listen to episode 145. We recorded that, guys, in June of 2023. And it's just amazing to see how relationships and friendships are bonded sometimes in these moments where you don't expect them. We had you on this podcast. You teach the science of success at the University of Texas, Austin. We were running an event in Austin called the Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience. You just so happened to come on our podcast a few months before that event. We didn't even know you were in Austin until we got on the phone or on the podcast. And from that moment, you came to speak at our event. You became a big proponent and coach to me, not only on my book, but on my Think It Be a Daily Visualization, which we'll talk about in a bit, that I still practice every single day since you coached me. And now you have your book. So I just want to recognize and be grateful for the relationship that we formed over the past year and a half and what you're bringing to others. And I want to speak to the entrepreneurs right now. You coach Rich and I on the methodology of the missing secret. The missing secret you talked about in this book, you coach Rich and I specifically on. A, I'm thankful for that. B, I'm still doing it. And I'd like to encourage entrepreneurs to listen to John Mitchell for a few minutes as to why you should do it too. And now we're practicing what we're preaching. I've been doing it ever since John's been coaching me. So John, why? Why, or how did you come to uncover this missing secret? Part one. And then part two, why is it so important for people to listen to this and go execute upon it?
Great question. So let me tackle the first one. I was 50. I wasn't as successful as I thought I should. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 30. So I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. And I had two goals in my life: to make enough money so I didn't have to work, and to find the woman of my dreams. And on the money, I always did pretty well, made 200, 300 grand a year. But when I hit 50, I just realized to have the exceptional life I dreamed of, I had to start netting over $1 million a year. And I'd never come close to that. And then on the girl, at 50, I'd never been married. And I did a lot of interviewing, but at 50, never married. And so when I'm sitting there at 50 and I'm feeling the scarcity of time, probably 3 months after I turned 50, an idea comes to me. find the top book in the world on success and apply that book literally word for word in my life. And so I'm like, that's a pretty good idea. And so I jump out of bed, I do a little research, and I discovered there's one book that's been read by 150 million people. And the next best-selling book on success has been read by a tenth that number. And of course, the book is Think and Grow Rich. And one of the things I think's fascinating about the book itself is that only 1 in 7 people in this culture have ever heard of the book, which is amazing to me when we live in this success-oriented culture, and there's one book that's the top book on success by a factor of 10, and 1 in 7 people has heard it. I'm like, whoa, we live in a culture that can't determine the profound from the mundane. And it's just this shallow thinking culture we live in. Nevertheless, when I discovered that Think and Grow Rich is the top book in the world on success by a factor of 10, I go and I buy the book and I read the book. And then I discover the problem. Book says there's a secret for success, but the author only gives us half of the secret. It's on the reader to figure out the other half. So I'm bummed out. I mope around for 3 weeks and then one day just get up and go, John, come on, man up, figure out the damn secret. And so I immerse myself in the book and spend, probably 2 months, 3 months reading it, probably read it 20 times. And the secret comes to me. And then a 12-minute day technique to apply it. And so I started applying it to a new business I was starting in the reverse mortgage field. And suddenly my income starts doubling and doubling to where 4 years later, I was making 25 times the 200 to 300 grand a year I was making the prior 20 years. And the thing that was particularly cool about it is I could see why it was happening. I was just playing the game at a higher level. I could do things I could never do before, and I had a level of control over myself beyond what I'd ever experienced before. And so I became fascinated by the fact that you could take 2 key scientific principles and apply them to your life and so materially impact your success. And about 10 years ago, I finally had enough money so I didn't have to work, and I sold my company. And I guess it was a month or 2 after I sold my company, I meet the former chancellor and president at the University of Texas. He says, hey, you got to teach this at Texas, and why don't we teach it together? And then that led to introduce me to the athletic director, who I taught my 12-minute day technique. He wanted to learn it. And that led to becoming the mental coach for the 18 head coaches. And then the latest iteration is over the last 2 years, the athletic department sponsored my course at the Combs School of Business. And now I am in the process of teaching my methodology to all 550 athletes at the University of Texas. So that's a little bit about the story. Now, maybe the more pertinent question is you ask, why is this important to your listeners, right? Is that essentially the question?
Yeah, I mean, you gave us the why you found it, and you had to dig in to find that missing secret. And actually, as you were talking about it, if you haven't read Think and Grow Rich, first of all, if you haven't heard about Think and Grow Rich, I don't believe you, because on our podcast, Rich and I talk about it a lot. So if you're an audience of ours, you've heard about it before. But if you haven't read it, you've been hearing about it, now's the time to go read it, because you will realize you're missing a secret. So I guess my question, John, is why should someone figure out what the secret is by reading your book and capturing that extra secret? Why not just read Think and Grow Rich and figure it out themselves? What do you have to offer, and why should they listen?
Let me ask your audience a question that I think is very pertinent. How do you create success in your life? Just think about that. How do you create success in your life? When I ask people that question in person, they'll stumble around for an answer. And then once they finish, I will try and recap what they said. And then the more pertinent question, second question, is how's that working for you? Generally, not that well, like me at 50, average life, but not the exceptional life. And the reality is most people are just winging life. they don't have an actual way of doing life. Accordingly, they just continually recreate their past. And here's the thing I want your audience to appreciate. We all have two fundamental problems we have to overcome in life. The first one is we're wired for survival, which causes 75% of our thoughts to be fear based. The other problem is that we're fundamentally geared to the recent past and we're oriented to the recent past. And so the effect of it is that when you wake up each morning, when your eyes open, you think about your problems and that generates some negative feelings. And those negative feelings generate more negative thoughts. And you get in this continual negative loop with nothing pulling you forward to your desired life. And as I'll explain a little more deeply in a minute, the solution is you create immense clarity about your life and you feed the succinct articulation of your life to yourself each day. Exactly the person you want to be, exactly what you want to accomplish, and precisely how you're going to achieve your clearly defined goals. When you do that, then you have a powerful force pulling you forward to your desired life. And you also make the right actions happen automatically without thinking. It's a powerful way to do life. And it's the alternative to winging life. Does that make sense?
The first thing I'm curious about is the coaching that you provided us, John, that I line up with John St. Pierre on, incredibly grateful for and appreciative and continue to use. Is the book, from a selfish perspective, is the book walking people through what you do in your coaching so that someone can buy a book and be able to do it? And if they struggle with that, they would then hire you for your coaching? Or is the book something different?
No, that's a great question. I think that the problem for me, I've been teaching this to other people for 10 years. And so I didn't do a book originally. And it's just worked out that I didn't do it. But I see that you have to have a book to teach the methodology and to teach the science behind the methodology. Again, this is leveraging people through science, the science of success. And one of the new additions to it since we last spoke is, and this is maybe why the book couldn't be written before now, was that I created an AI algorithm. Well, I didn't. I had some tech wizards do it, and they created my template and made it super simple to tailor my template to somebody else's life. All they got to do is answer about 50 questions, and I give people a sample answer, and they answer the questions, and then they just press a button, and 10 seconds later, my life GPS template is customized to your unique life. And so that really, I think, was the missing component that had to be in place before I could write the book. And so I give people access to the template if they buy the book.
Very cool. I remember from your teachings that there were a couple things you said you could not get over. You couldn't get over the fact that success in life was based on the repetitive daily habits and thoughts that one has. And the second part of it was, in 95% of those daily thoughts and habits are subconscious.
Right.
So you're not left to be able to control much within that. And then you went to the reticular activating system and how to start to program the reticular activating system. Can you just elaborate on a few pieces of that? Although some of that is in that episode 145, I think it'd be a great refresher on elaborating on a touch of that and speaking to some of that science of how the mind works and plays in with success.
Right. Great questions. Think about this. This is my perspective. The most significant thing I ever learned in my life is that 95% of my daily thoughts and actions are unconscious. And the reason that's significant is because, as I learned in Think and Grow Rich, your daily actions determine your success in each area of your life. So the cumulative effect of your daily actions determine your success in your career, in your marriage, in your health, right? I never thought of success in such simple terms. And then I read that essentially 95% of your daily actions are unconscious. And so once I connected the two, I saw, wait a minute, if 95% of your daily actions are unconscious, then they're basically on autopilot and they're unexamined actions. 95% of your actions are unexamined. And by virtue of that, you don't have control of them. In fact, because you're wired for survival, they're innately wired to be fear-based and reactive. Exactly the opposite of how you need to be productive, creative, and happy. And that's how I started connecting the dots. And I'm like, oh, I see how foundational this idea is about that 95% of your daily thoughts and actions are unconscious. And you guys would find this interesting. I was just on a podcast 2 weeks ago. The host was great. And I asked him, I said, so do you believe that 95% of your daily thoughts and actions are unconscious? He goes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I go, what are you doing about it? Nothing. Because he had not fully connected the dots that I had in terms of if your daily actions determine your success and 95% of them are unexamined and by their nature, they're prone to be fear-based and reactive. You got to fix that. What a lousy way to live. And I say this to your audience to just think about that, not just hear it in terms of the statistic, but think how that impacts your life if 95% of your daily actions are unconscious. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that certainly helps. Thank you.
Now, can I address the reticular activating system?
Yeah, please do.
So for people who don't know, that's the filter for the brain. Eh, the human brain can take in about 100 bits of information at any one moment, but it gets 10 times that amount, and therefore it has to have a filter. And it lets into your consciousness that which you tell it is important to you. And the powerful aspect of my methodology, I think, is that when you're feeding the succinct articulation of your desired life to yourself every day, it gives you immense clarity as to what's more important to you and brings more of that into you. It's like the Google or YouTube algorithm. It works on the same principle. You know, what you tell it is important, you get more of it. And how that I think that relates to us as people is we are all a combination of our genetics and what has come into our consciousness to this point in our life. Would you guys agree with that?
Yep.
So if you can influence what's coming into your consciousness by feeding the succinct articulation of your life to yourself each day, it's a game changer.
Can you describe what type of person would be able to pick your book up and implement it with success versus the type of person who would want to use you as a coach?
Very good question. Let me just say this. My methodology is not for 98% of people, believe it or not. And I learned this from Darren Hardy because about 5 years ago, I decided I wanted to show what I'd created to the top expert in the world on success, just to see if there's any flaws in it, see if there's anything similar to it in the success business. And so I write a big check, and Ginger and I fly out to La Jolla, California, and spend 3 days with Darren. And he was, in my opinion, arguably the top expert in the world on success. And so he looks at my template and I explain it. And he goes, wow, this is really good. But he says, John, people aren't going to spend 12 minutes a day on this. And I'm like, Darren, how the hell can that be? It 25x my income. Time Magazine did a cover story on the science behind it, and we're applying the central concept of the top book of the world on success to people's lives. What do you mean they're not going to spend 12 minutes a day on it? He says the dirty little secret of the success business is that for most people, more success is merely a preference. merely a preference. And he says that's 98% of people. He says what you've got is only for the driven 2%, where more success is a necessity. And at the time, I thought everybody wants to be more successful. This is for everybody. But he was dead on. And so what evolved with me is I don't worry about the 98% that where more success is just a preference. If they're happy with their life, more power to them. But there's a lot of people in that 2% I see that were and are just like I was, which was always felt like there was more in the tank, but why couldn't I get it to come out? And this book is for the 2%. And I see more specifically is for people that are driven, but also people that are deep as reflected by being reflective about their life. And it's those two things. And I see it's really for people that are determined to play this game of life at their full potential. That's really the essence of it. It's not really based on where your income is now, and you don't have to be an entrepreneur to embrace it, but that's really who it's for.
What amazed me in the first time, I think Rich and I, you and I were both like, what? What amazed me was your coaching model, which you may or may not be doing anymore. I'd love for you to answer that question too. But when we first met you, you said, hey, listen, for me to coach you, you got to be making over 6 figures, period, end of story, or I won't work with you. And secondly, I guarantee you, money back guarantee, you will double your income in the first year. And I don't really need your money to do your coaching. I just want to make sure you're serious. But if you don't double your money, I'm going to give you your money back. And the amount of people you would talk to that made over 6 figures, you guaranteed them money back. They didn't double their income and they still didn't go for it to learn about the coaching system and the missing secret and everything that was there. I'd like for you to explain, why maybe the 2% and the 98%. But in your mind, I know that drove you bananas. It drove you bananas that people wanted things, but maybe they didn't want it bad enough or hard enough, or it wasn't a necessity, it was a want. And therefore they wouldn't move forward with a system like this. What have you learned since that podcast we recorded, episode 145, when you gave us that analogy to today in writing a book? What have you learned about success and individuals and those that are hungry to learn more and want more and those that aren't?
What you taught me, probably the best lesson I ever had is you and I got to know each other and we became friends. You told me, I don't know if you remember this, you said, I'm betting that it sounds too good to be true. You remember telling me that? And of course, I think that probably was true. And I think that most people are not that serious about it. But I think that really is true. And one of the things that I see evolving with me is I don't really like to coach my methodology. I don't like to have to sit down and teach them every little thing. And I see that now the book does that. I think it does a good job of that. What turns me on is to take people that are already embracing the methodology and are really totally into it. And then I can go deep with it. That is, at my stage in life, that is way more fun for me than teach them all the nuances. And one of the things that's worth saying at this point is, because we may forget, but here's how the human mind works. And this is critical because I see that my life changed materially once I just understood how the human mind works. So the conscious mind sets your intention and is influenced by logic. Subconscious mind controls your daily actions, or 95% of them. And it's only influenced by repetition. And the example I used last time was losing weight. Conscious mind sets the intention to lose weight based on the logic of the health benefit. The reason people fail to lose weight, obviously, is not from lack of intention, but from lack of influencing the part of their brain that controls their actions, the subconscious mind, and specifically what they're eating and exercising. And so what that really means is, again, your conscious mind is setting your intentions using logic. But the subconscious mind is the obedient servant of the conscious mind, and it does what the conscious mind tells it to do. And it doesn't have the benefit of logic to argue, I shouldn't do that, or I don't want to do that. It's just the obedient servant of the conscious mind. And that's the beauty of it. The subconscious mind is so easy to manipulate. It's all repetition. And that's the power when you feed the succinct articulation of your desired life, exactly the person you want to be, exactly what you want to accomplish, and how you can achieve your goals. When you feed that succinct articulation of your life, that's the repetition the subconscious mind needs after approximately 21 days to feed it back to yourself in your thoughts and actions automatically without thinking.
Yeah, it does. And you said something I want to go to. You said what turns me on is when we go deep with something specific. And I want to be vulnerable for a minute if you guys are okay with it, because I have the expert here for me. There's something not working in this plan for me. And I could tell you the reason I still read this visualization and or listen to the visualization every day is because I saw, and you told me I would see this. After a while, I would do things and I'd be like, oh, wow, that's cool. Cool. I just did that and didn't think about it, whether it be breathe before I respond to my wife if she's aggravated or whatever it may be, right? All these different. And there's a component of this plan that I'm struggling with. And ever since I drafted this plan, my daily visualization, it may sound silly to everybody, but I say in my visualization and in my improvement, avoid chips and fries. I can't avoid chips and fries. And I've been training myself for over a year on this, trying to train my subconscious mind, and I can't not do it. And it's just weird to me that of my entire plan, there's probably a couple other areas that I'm not perfect in, of my entire plan, I just can't get over it. And I read it every day, and I still had a bag of chips of Panera Bread before this podcast.
John,
Rich,
can
you're
I take
laughing.
a crack at this from what I know of your methodology, and you can correct me? Feel free to be like, nope, Rich, you're totally wrong. Can I take a crack at
Yeah,
this?
go for it. Go for it.
John, what you have in writing is avoid chips and fries. So your subconscious is hearing chips and fries. What you want to recraft is instead of chips and fries, what do you want to be ordering? You can't reinforce what you don't want. You have to reinforce what you do want and then repeat that. John Mitchell, that's my best crack at it. Can you?
You know what? I think that's very good, but let me add to that because
Yes.
I do support what you said. First of all, this happens because when you first start doing it, I would say 90% of all the stuff happens automatically without thinking, but there'll be 10% that it doesn't quite work. And the solution is simple. You just change the wording for some reason, whatever, and you won't know the reason. Your subconscious mind just doesn't respond to it. And so I think you've got to think about, first of all, you can't tell yourself to do a negative. That's a key thing, and it's got to be specific. But if it was me, I would change how I would say it in that, let me think about this. Put a little of the why behind it if you struggled with it. I'd say something like, I avoid fries and chips because I see how damaging they are to my health. And on that point, there's a fabulous book out that talks about how French fries are the devil's food. It's the worst thing you can eat.
What about truffle fries, though? Are they better?
Oh, you're good with truffles. But I think that with any visualization, I ran into that. And there's sometimes in my visualization, and I've been doing it, 20 years, there's things that I'm like, yeah, that's how I'm saying this is not completely working to the degree I want. I just got to change how I say it. And then inevitably, 100% of the time, you can fix it.
I am certainly not the expert. John Mitchell, you are. I'm just curious to ask you, John St. Pierre, when you have an opportunity to order chips and fries, what is it that you would like to or should be ordering?
Chips and fries.
You know what? Right now in your conscious mind, you're saying, I don't want to do that. So if you don't want to do that, what do you want to do?
I guess eat healthier. So fruits, salads, things like that. But I don't, but it's like, I almost feel like an addiction to chips and fries. It just sounds ridiculous, but you're right. I'm reading chips and fries every single day. And by the way, when I'm in the moment of deciding, like, what am I going to order? I actually reflect on how I'm letting myself down and go, screw it, fries. And when I don't, I feel better. When I don't take that action, I do order the side salad instead or whatever. I do feel better that I made the right decision. So that's my.
Here's another thought. I have struggled recently with eating too many chips. And I just did it the other night. I'm like, okay, I'm going to have 3 chips. That's it. 3 chips. And you could do it with 3 French fries if you wanted to wean yourself off of it. The subconscious mind only responds to things that are specific. And so try that.
Okay. I'd be curious, John, and you don't have to check in. You don't even have to do this. I would just be curious. If you rewrote that to say, I order fruits and vegetables as my side item to my main entree, something like that, and remove the words chips and fries from it. Try that for 21 days, see what happens. To reinforce, John Mitchell, what you just said about having 3 of them, I'll tell you, after me going to Weight Watchers for 4 years with my dad for a period of time in there, one of the things that I learned there was, and it's so true, the first bite is always the best.
Mm-hmm.
The second bite is about 50% as good as the first. And the rest of your eating is chasing the first bite, which is why we continue to put more and more food in. Instead of 1 fry, now you try 3 fries, and it's just all subconscious that you're chasing that first bite taste. So I never thought of it quite the way you said it, John Mitchell. I think that's great. And I think I'm going to try it as the 3 bites and watch the progressive decline in enjoyment from bite 1 to bite 3. It won't be consistent.
That is a great point. That is, and it's absolutely true. Great point.
So, John St. Pierre, that was awesome in terms of going deeper, love, appreciate your vulnerability to expose that. John Mitchell, what are 1 or 2 other areas that you find yourself coaching people on who do the practice that are areas where you're finding yourself go deeper more than once with some level of consistency to enhance and refine how they're using the program, doing the 12 minutes a day?
I'll share something that happened when I taught my class last semester. So keep in mind, I'm at the University of Texas. Half my class is 36 students. Almost half of them are athletes. And I had probably the most famous 19-year-old in the country, Arch Manning, in my class. And so off we go. And this surprised me. I had a good friend of mine come and speak to my class. And he tells me after he spoke that so many of my students came up to him and said, I have this feeling of not enough. I'm not good enough. And I had not seen that before. And the next class, I went deep on that, and 100% of them had the feeling of, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. And I told them, I said, of course you feel that way. You're wired for survival. You're wired to be fear-based. And so you're wired to feel like you're not enough. And I thought that is no different than people that are 50 years old who never fixed that problem. And the way we fixed it in my class, and you can easily fix this using the book, because I talk about it in the book. I told the class, I'm like, first of all, you are good enough, because I've personally met every one of you. That's what I did in the first 2 weeks of the class. I sat out with each one of them to get to know them. But I said, I'm just telling you, you are enough, but you don't believe. And I said, so let's recreate you with intention, because I said, the you that exists today has been created haphazardly. There's things about yourself that you like. There's things about yourself you don't like. But it's all been haphazard. In fact, how you were raised and parenting was largely haphazard. It certainly wasn't your intention in terms of how you were raised. And I said, why don't we just take a blank sheet of paper and with a conscious mind, create the ideal you in each of the 5 key areas of your life using my life GPS template. And then once we create the ideal you, then let's start, and we're doing that with the conscious mind. Then let's go after that subconscious mind, which is controlling your daily actions. And you feed that to yourself, either listening or reading. You feed that to yourself every day. And after 21 days, the right actions start happening automatically. And that ideal you is who you become because the subconscious mind doesn't have logic and it can't argue with it. And it just, like I said earlier, is the obedient servant of the conscious mind. And, you can tell the subconscious mind things that are just not true. And after a certain period of time, it believes, even though it's not true. That's how easily the subconscious mind is manipulated. And so that's probably a long-winded answer to your question. But the point is, I think that everybody has this fundamental feeling of they're not enough. And that's what causes this negative inner voice that exists with so many people. And in working with our football team and Steve Sarkisian, who I know really well, who now is, I think he's the top paid coach in the country now because he had a couple of NFL teams trying to steal him away this past year. So now he's got an even bigger raise. And I was telling him, and I was telling the kids in my class, what a lousy way to live when you have this negative inner voice where you are piling on you. Life is hard enough without that happening. Why not create a you where you're your best friend, your biggest advocate, with the attitude that you'd accomplish anything you set your mind to? That to me would be the ideal way to live using this methodology. After 21 days of feeding it to the subconscious mind, your subconscious mind embraces it. And that's how you become. And what actually happens is that negative inner voice doesn't go away immediately. What happens is we address it where when it rears its ugly head, you trigger to something you're grateful for. And that will work for about 2 months. And then around the 2-month period, negative inner voice just completely goes away. Just completely goes away. And so that's how it works.
John, do you recommend when people do this writing on the ideal you in those 5 areas, is your recommendation that they write about the behaviors of the ideal you or the outcome of the ideal you? In other words, is it would you recommend somebody say, the ideal me, I'm vulnerable and confident?
Right.
That would be almost like an outcome. Or would you say what's more powerful if you get specific in there? Vulnerable and confident isn't specific enough. You need to say something more like, I share openly about my personal and professional failures and do it as easily as I do my successes. That
Yeah.
might be an example
Right.
of something
Right.
behavioral. Is there a blend of outcomes and behavior, or do you recommend one versus the other? Where are you at on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And here's what I see when I go to people, and the central concept of the topic World on Success is to create immense clarity about your life and feed the succinct articulation of your life to yourself each day as your new morning routine. People will go, huh, that's pretty interesting. Okay, yeah, I think I'll do that. And then once they start the process, they think, whoa, wait a minute. I don't really know clarity. What are you talking about with myself, with my health and with my marriage and with my career? Now we're getting into by the concept in principle, but now we got to do it. And as people will see in my template, you just answered the questions more or less like I answered them. You can see the sentence structure and that type of thing. And it's really a combination of the outcome and the key behaviors, and it's all said conversationally. And so when they press the button at the end, it's in their words, and because they're following the example, it comes out pretty much like it needs to be. And we even incorporated Chat GPT in it because what happens sometimes is there's space limits on how long their answer can be, and they might go over by double. Just you plug it into Chat GPT and it gets it into the space limitations like that. So it's pretty powerful.
Thank you for that. I'll tell you, John, you're a hero for high achievers who want more in their life and being able to show them the how to do it. And John and I are so appreciative for your mentorship and teaching of us. Any final words you'd like to leave us with as we close out this conversation?
A story that really changed everything for me. And, this happened a few years ago. My wife, Ginger, and I became grandparents for the first time, and our granddaughter was named after Ginger, a beautiful little soul with her whole life ahead of her. And the day after we went over to Hannah's house, and after the initial oohing and eyeing, Ginger and Hannah hand me baby G, and they walk away, leaving me alone with her. And I look down at this tiny, perfect human, feeling the warmth of her arms in my arms. And in that instant, something unexpected happened. I started to cry, and tears just welled up and spilled over because I realized with absolute clarity how precious her life was and how she would probably live to be 100 years old, and how more than anything, I wanted her to have a beautiful and fulfilled life. And then another realization hit me really hard. The quality of her life would come down to one thing: the thoughts that occupied her mind most of the time. That's what would determine her happiness, her success, and her impact in the world. And right then, through those tears, I made a vow to myself. I would do everything in my power to shape the creation of those thoughts, because I knew that if she learned how to direct her mind, she could create the life she truly wanted. And that's why I shared this with you. Your life is precious. And tonight, when you lay your head on the pillow, I want you to ask yourself one question. In the next 3 to 5 years of my life, and if they're like the last 3 or 5 years, will I be happy with that? And if the answer is no, then know this: I have a way to change it, a way to rewire your mind in just 12 minutes a day to pull you through to your desired life. And it worked for me. It's worked for a ton of other people, and it can work for you. So just think about your precious life when you put the head on the pillow tonight.
Yeah, I love that, John. And it certainly has worked for me as well, except for the chips and the fries. But the other part has worked. And I do recommend everybody pick up the book, The Missing Secret from John Mitchell. It's the sequel to Think and Grow Rich. And please go get Amazon. You can find it. John, how else can people find information about you?
Go to www.themissingsecret.org. Let me say that again, themissingsecret.org. And for your audience, I have a special gift at that URL. It's a 9-minute video that fully explains the secret of Think and Grow Rich. And so it's free, but again, themissingsecret.org.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, John.
Okay, thank you.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
Fun things. And both of us practice the methodology of the 12 minutes a day, but yet there's this deeper side of it. And I think it's so cool that John gives away the first part of that coaching in the book. I'm going to encourage a lot of people who I coach who specifically are practicing good priority management for starters, because as we know in his program, that's part of what he teaches. But there's this next level of working with the subconscious mind beyond the very manual priority management type stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. We spend a lot of time going to the gym, working out, taking care of our physical body. We don't do enough for our mental mind, meditation, training your self-conscious mind, all things that we just don't do enough of. And how critical it is. Every time I talk to John, I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta do more. I gotta keep training my subconscious mind, improving upon my ability. The reticular activating system is the filter. And when you think about it, we have so many things coming at us so quick. I'm now watching YouTube videos at like 1.5, 1.75. It's coming in so fast, right? Just these inputs are coming in, and we have to learn how to train our mind for success. And I love the idea that the more motivated you are to build the life that you aspire to build out of necessity, not because I want it, I need it, I want to achieve different things in life, the more driven you are to train your subconscious mind. The one area, Rich, that I had a little bit of an aha moment today with, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is this idea that here he is teaching a university class, University of Texas, some pretty accomplished 19-year-olds in the group, and not one of them felt like they were enough. And I think about my kids who are now 16 and 18, and many other teenagers or university students, and how important this content is for them to really design who they want to be. He said, be your best friend and advocate. Be very clear on who you want to be and what you want to be. And it just makes me wonder, is there a workshop or maybe this version of a book for the teenage university student who needs that assistance because they are enough? They just don't know that they're enough. And quite honestly, I deal with imposter syndrome. You deal with imposter syndrome. We all deal with it. And it's just very touching, I think, to me, to think that there's a lot of people out there that don't feel like they're enough, but they also don't know how to train their subconscious mind to be their best friend enough.
One of the things that I experienced when going from 314 pounds to doing a triathlon in a year is I knew and I practiced and I repeated to myself, it was okay. I'm not enough to be able to do that. But today, I'm going to do enough so I can get there. So there's something about the belief that you're not enough that can be a healthy thing. That's what you and I have classically learned is the gap, the difference between where you are and where you want to go. I think it's okay in a healthy way to acknowledge I'm not where I want to go. It's even okay to say I'm not enough to be where I want to go. But do you have a plan? And are you doing today what will it take to be enough tomorrow? To be enough in the series of doing today I'm enough in order to get to where you want to go in that long-term vision. That's very different than the self-defeating piece of I'm not enough without a vision and without a plan.
Love that. Very well said. What you said also reminds me of the book, The One Thing from Gary Keller. What's the one thing I need to do right now to be successful into the future? And if you do that appropriately, you can move forward into the future with those one rock, one thing building upon that. To me, the one thing is big. And John talked about how do you create success in your life? And if you think about that question, if you're listening to this, you say, how do you create success in your life? And the second question right behind that, after you think about that is, well, how's that working out for you? And one of the things that I learned that before meeting John, I had is a life plan. I still do, a 30-year life plan. And I had that 30-year life plan, and I knew exactly where I wanted to be in 30 years in different areas of my life, exactly where I wanted to be in 10 years, exactly where I wanted to be in 5 years, in a year, and even quarterly. But then I'd put it away, and I'd look at it every quarter. And what John helped me implement was this daily reaffirmation of what I want, how I'm going to do it, what I'm going to improve every single day to train that subconscious mind. So my habits and what I was doing every day led to that future success. So to me, it's been a great opportunity to spend time with John, have him at the Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience. We got to get him back. We're going to Winston-Salem this year, October 4th to the 6th for the Entrepreneurs United Empowerment Experience. Would love to have John there with us. Thanks for joining us, and see you next week on the Entrepreneurs United podcast.